Okay, so in this video, I wanted to talk about my experience with deportation. I arrived to the United States in 1999 with my parents. I was 7 years old, and well, I basically grew up in the United States. I guess you could say I had that transition period because I remember that I remembered Mexico, right? I had lived here and I knew some stuff from here, but not a lot, right? Just family, just like my grandparents, some aunts, some cousins. That was about it. Um, but I didn't really know the culture, right, in Mexico. So then when I arrived to the United States when I was 7 years old, I guess it was kind of like a culture shock because my mom tells me that she remembers me telling her or asking her to return to Mexico because I missed it. I guess I wasn't accustomed to the United States, right? I was in a foreign land. I felt kind of weird, out of place. I didn't know the language. I struggled with the language for my first couple of years in the States. Eventually, I learned the language. I got through elementary school, through middle school, and then around middle school, I started getting into trouble, right? I started, I guess you could say it was like I would always try to be, I would always want to stand out or try to stand out, right? And then I remember that what would make you stand out, for example, in middle school or just in general in the United States, first of all, it's your culture, it's your heritage, right, where you come from. So, I used to hang out with the Mexicans, right, with the Hispanics, as they say in the United States. That's who I would kick it with. Those were my friends. And it's just like when you get to high school, they kind of have like a division, right? You have, well, I'm talking back in 2006, right? They had, I was in high school from 2006 to 2010, and there was this race division, right? Of like Asians, African Americans, Hispanics, and white people, right? And and then you start doing like bad things, like with your homies and shit. Start getting into trouble with the police. I mean, I was watching this guy that he never did anything, and he got caught with weed at 17, and this is maybe 2020, so it's like, I guess back in 2006 deportations weren't really that common, that or if they were, you didn't really hear about them. But yeah, I ran into like a lot of trouble. Did a like hanging out in the streets and shit like that. Um, I would get locked up and then like get out and whatever. But I guess all of that didn't, I guess the government didn't really like take it into consideration, the federal government, because I was underage. I don't know how the law is right now, in the United States, but uh, back then, it was like if you were undocumented or at least underage and undocumented, it wasn't really like a big deal unless you did something really bad, I'm thinking. But um, then when I turned 18, I got caught with a DUI, driving under the influence. I remember the police officer told me that if I wanted to go with him to the police station so they could get like my blood level of like my alcohol blood level. I wasn't even that drunk. I think I had like 3 or 4 beers that night, like a 40. And he said that if I went with him, they would let me go with just a fine, right? But if I didn't, then I was gonna have like more serious consequences. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go. Either way, I was already in the system at 18. But the police officer was never like, are you an immigrant? Are you legal here? Like it was kind of like whatever. So he took me downtown. They got my blood level and they let me go, and that was that. I got a fine because of it, and that was it. That was yeah, that was when I turned 18. That was like a couple. like a week or two after my 18th birthday. And then, a year goes by. And I think this happened because this is when Obama was in office, and the Democrats are kind of like more lenient on immigrants. But in the state where I was, I think in 2011, so the DUI happens in 2010. And then in 2011, that's when a Republican starts his term in the state. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I mean, 4 months later, 5 months later, I mean, there's a there's the ICE agents at my door, right, ready to pick me up. I guess what came up in the system was that DUI because I was like in the system already as an adult, and they were probably because after that, like I think not too long after that, less than a year after that, was when the Dreamers Act started happening, and they started to give people that were undocumented. I mean, like teenagers and like young adults, like I was at that time. They started to give them an opportunity. So I think they started to give them the dreamers permit or permission, which is like a thing that helps you stay in the states even though you're undocumented. They wanted to get rid of everybody, I suppose, before they started doing that. Everybody that was like in the system, because they did something bad or like committed a crime or whatever. They came at my door. They came to my house on it was in May 2011. I remember that like that day, it was a morning, and it was a Saturday morning, and I remember that they were picking like, I don't know, there were like probably two or three or four vans, like trucks, and there were a bunch of agents. And what they would do is that they would drive around like the whole like different cities. They would just go from place to place. They would arrive there, and they would surround the house, knock. The person would come out, arrest them, and then just put them in the truck. Families crying and all, like, and they were just picking people up that day, like the whole day. And then eventually, well, I ended up like going to jail, and I was in jail for about 5 weeks. I remember that my court date was 4 weeks from when I got locked up. I was stressing, man. I was like, man, I don't want to be locked up. I fucking hate being locked up. I hated it. I don't know how it is now, or if there are different ways in which immigration does this. But what happened with us, with the people that I was with and myself, was that they give you like the option, right, to appeal. You can appeal. And I remember, I don't know if this influenced me, but I was staying with this guy, like he was my cellmate. He was like an older man, right? And he was talking about how he was in there for like 5 years, I think 4 or 5 years, and he would just appeal and appeal and appeal because his family was there and he didn't want to leave the country. He wanted to be released back into the country and back in the States, right? I was like, I don't want to be like him. I don't want to be locked up, and by then I was already in like a tougher prison. Yeah, I was like, I don't want to be here, locked up and waiting to see if, the judge is going to wake up, in a good mood one morning and, let me out on bail or on a signature bond or some shit. So, I think maybe that was impulsive, but, that kind of influenced me. And the people I was with were also kind of like, man, let's get the fuck out of here. Let's just go. And we were all kind of like, yeah, I mean, I made my own decision that day, and you signed your deportation. Well, that's what I did. You sign your deportation, and then you end up waiting like to get deported too, for them to get enough people. So then they get enough people. What happened with us was it was like 3 in the morning when they woke us up. They chain you up, legs and hands and everything. They walk you out to like the bus, and then to the airport, and then on a plane, and then we stopped at another state to pick up more people. I think they drop you off at the border and you cross and you're free, right? But you're back in Mexico. So yeah, after that, I mean, I gotta say, like, it's a pretty, this was back in 2011, and if you lived in the States for a while and watch news from Mexico, you can see that they always talk about how violent Mexico is, and it is violent, but you imagine things that you imagine like people on the street with guns and shit, and that's not really how it is. I mean, but you still carry that paranoia with you. So I was all paranoid, at the border. There's like these people that help you out, like there's a refugee house, for immigrants and shit. You can stay there. They give you lifts or rides to like the bus station so you can go to wherever you're going. I ended up, back in my state, and I was just hanging out, I think, for like the first, I would say, 3 months. I was having a, like it was kind of like I was on vacation almost, it wasn't really like, it hadn't dawned on me, like the situation I was in. Like I eventually decided to go out to the beach because I wanted to live like where foreigners were. That experience turned out kind of bad. I got sick. It was, I was 19. It was my first time living on my own. I didn't know a lot of things back then. I was not experienced at all. I mean, to like, I'll just give you one example. I got typhoid, which is this like bacteria or virus in your stomach that you get when you like eat food from the streets or you don't wash your hands, and like you eat dirty stuff, or shit that's not like washed, or you don't wash your hands. And when I got typhoid, I went to the doctor, and the doctor gave me some medication. And I was taking, like, I didn't have water, like drinking water. I mean, you could buy bottles of water, but I didn't really have like a system for how to get my water, like, the water that you drink in your house. And I had milk, so I would drink milk, like to quench my thirst. And then I found out later that you're not supposed to drink milk with medication because it like cuts the effect of the medication. I had no idea, man. I had no idea about any of this stuff, like how to pay bills, how to like get water. In Mexico, it's like getting, like in the States, for example, if you want to take a shower, you just take a shower and that's it. In Mexico, you have to like turn on the boiler, with like a lighter, and wait like 15 or 20 minutes until the water heats up, so then and then you have to turn off the boiler and then get in the shower. You have to buy the boiler like every couple of months. That boiler, sometimes you have to buy two, or if you buy the same one, that works for the water that you take a shower with, and also for the stove in your kitchen, right? So it could heat up the stove in your kitchen. You gotta buy that. Like there's a truck that comes by and gives you that. The water, you also gotta buy like these garrafones, like the water, like big water bottle jugs, that have like 20 liters of water. That's how you get your water. Like just all these things, right? My aunt kind of helped me out, so she was kind of like, you can. I didn't know how to cook. I didn't know what to. I still don't really know how to cook, but she kind of taught me like a couple of things that I could do here and there. Buy your meals. The good thing in Mexico is that you can get like pretty cheap meals, like locally, like at local food markets. They're like homemade meals, very delicious and very cheap. So I mean, you're not gonna starve in Mexico. But like the whole like culture shock thing, I think was just like a big, it still is. It's still like a big deal for me. Like I still don't really know, you know, how to navigate in the Mexican culture, sort of say. Yeah, it's different, definitely. I think one of the first things I noticed in Mexico is that people will like identify very people will kind of like detect things that are wrong with you and will let those be known to you, right? Like they kind of like criticize you, like your family, your friends, like it's a culture that's kind of based on criticizing. And that type of attitude, I think, is very good when you want to study. like when you want to learn. So if you go to school, you're going to learn a lot, you're going to think a lot. But I mean, if you're just trying to relax and like have a good time with like friends or like with people at work, it's always kind of tense, you know? Or I don't know if it's just me, but I always feel like everything is like tense, you know? Like you gotta watch what you say, you gotta watch how you say it. You know, there was like a phrase that people, and you know, like there are things that people will say that will prove my point, such as in Mexico, anything you say can and will be used against you, right? That's like the first order of things. That's how things that's how things basically are. My experience after being deported has been kind of weird because I came from, you know, hanging out on the streets with the homies and everything to kind of like just getting full blown into school, you know, like just going to college, you know, teaching English, you know, like kind of like the student life. And you know, that's what I keep doing. You know, I have like this other creative side where I like make rap music and shit, and that's kind of like what I've also been focusing on right now. When I got here, I would also make rap music, right? And that's something that I wanted to do in the States. You know, I never really went after it here in Mexico. I mean, when I first got here, I performed once at this like restaurant, but you know, back in 2011, rap wasn't really like a thing. I think now, more days in 2023, people will view rap more acceptably. They will say, okay, it's kind of like tattoos in Mexico. Like people in the States could be like tatted up, and you know, a police officer is tatted up, you know, and people won't mind. But in Mexico, like if you have a tattoo, people will think you're like bad, right? Or at least that's how they used to think back in 2011. I mean, now in 2023, I think if you see someone with a tattoo, you know, there's still like a taboo, but it's not viewed as bad as it was before, right? So like people tend to like be a little bit more open as time goes by. But I would say, I mean, like Mexicans pride themselves for being like traditional, for having you know, family values, for you know, like families big in Mexico, in the sense of like, you know, like everything you do outside of work and school, you do it with your family. You know, like if you're hanging out with your cousins, with your uncles and your aunts, with your mom and your dad, right? Like it's not really like a friends type of culture where like you have a bunch of friends and you're always with them. You know, that like in the States is more like that. You know, like you have your immediate family, you know, like your mom and dad and siblings, and then you have friends, and then you're always hanging out with your friends, and you know, kind of like the Friends series. In Mexico, it's more like family, like you're always with your family, right? And I think I'm not. I mean, maybe there are many reasons why that is, but I could say one of them is because trust isn't really big in Mexico. Like people don't trust people because you know, because bad things happen, because the crime rate is high. I mean, things do happen, so that's, I think, why people don't really go out of their immediate families or their extended families into like, you know, friends. Friends are kind of treated, I would say, very standardly, right? Like you'll talk about your problems with your friends, they'll help you out, you'll get advice, but I mean, that's about it. There's no like real fraternity, you know, like let's live experiences together. Let's, you know, let's go through life together. Like kind of like in the States. No, in Mexico it's more like, you know, we'll like go out, get a cup of coffee, talk about some stuff, and then that's it, right? I would say I'm still not adjusted, you know. And if you were to ask me, like, maybe a couple years back, like, would you go back to the States? I was kind of like, nah, I don't really want to go. I don't really want to go back. But now, you know, I had a 10-year ban, and in 2021, that ban was lifted, I guess. So, I mean, I could technically go back if I wanted to, and I just have to go through all the bureaucratic process, like getting my visa, having an appointment with the council or the consulate or whatever the fuck it's called. All of that is something that I do want to do. But yeah, I mean, like, I'm not trying to like skip over the hardship that it's been, like the culture shock that I've had to basically live with ever since I got here, where it's kind of like, different culture. You can't really operate the way that you were in the States, where you were basically like able to be yourself. And, here you have to kind of like be uniformed, you have to dress a certain way. Or people, I mean, if you dress like, like anything that's not like formal, people will treat you differently, right? They won't really pay attention to you. Like, I think there's discrimination everywhere. And in the United States, I think it's very typical that you experience racial discrimination, basically being whatever race you are. And I think in Mexico it's more of a social discrimination, right? It's like a social status, like that's based on money. Like if you have a lot of money, you're able to do things, but if you don't, I mean, you're not only not going to be able to do things that you want to do, but you're going to be treated differently, right? So money is like a big topic in Mexico. Um, and like in the States, you could say, well, so it's the same in the States. But it's like, yeah, if you don't have money in the States, for example, you could have like social assistance. You get aid from the government. If you go somewhere, people are gonna treat you the same. It's not gonna be like, oh, here comes a poor person, let's treat them differently. No, like you're gonna get the same attention anywhere. And here, it's not really like that. Like status really matters here. It matters, like who you are and what family you come from, for instance. I think I also like fell into depression. I mean, I still don't know if I have it, just because I mean, when you get deported, I think anywhere in the world, and if you're from anywhere, like if you get deported, I think you're gonna feel lonely. You feel isolated. You feel like you're not a part of the place where you're at. I mean, and when I went to the States when I was 7, when I was 7, 8, 9, growing up over there, I would feel out of place, because I wasn't from there to begin with, and I was Mexican. So I was like, to the white people, you're not white, you're Mexican. So you're treated differently because of your race, right? And then when I get here, it's like, oh, you don't speak Spanish the right way, you don't say things the right way, you don't dress the right way, you don't almost it's almost like you don't think the right way, right? Like because I'm telling you, it's a different, like it's a different way of behaving. You gotta be more formal. Like everything is formal, like you gotta dress nicely, trousers and like a shirt, right? Like if you're a man. And also, like I was mentioning, everybody's kind of like in niches of their family, like family clusters, right? So if you try to befriend someone, or if you try to befriend people, it's not like in the States where you can just like have a ton of friends and just like be doing stuff all the time. Like it's kind of like people don't know you, so they don't trust you, right? There are like trust issues, and for good reason, because crime is high and everything, like I already mentioned. So all of that isolates you, all of that leaves you kind of like yeah, like feeling sad, depressed. You get angry, you get really angry, you get mad at the world. But I think like the American culture kind of has this, like, well, you gotta keep fighting, you gotta keep going, you gotta keep I think I have that like in me, that fight where it's like, you still wanna grow, you still wanna learn things, you still wanna be a better version of yourself, right? So you keep going, you keep working with the lemons that God gives you, right? God gives you lemons, make lemonade. And I think also, like this video I was watching of this girl, she was talking about when she got deported too. And I think it's important to have God in your life, right? Like one of the first things I I did when I got here, and it wasn't really because I was looking for it, but I ended up working in a church, and I would go to church, right? Like on Sundays because I had to clean the church, but I would sit there and listen to the pastor preach and everything, and it's you need God to help you, in these situations when you get deported. I don't know, I think it's like a learning process. You have to be open to learn more about your situation, understand why things happened the way they happened, and learn to move on, with your life. Learn to eventually, overcome the bad or the difficulties and come out a better person, because they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I think that applies when you get deported. You become like one tough son of a bitch, and you got to use that, right? You got to use that to, I don't know, reach out, share your story, you know, let people know that there are better ways to live life. Yeah, I think that's like the message that I can say for now. But yeah, this is an ongoing process. I don't think I'm anywhere near healed or anything like that. I still have things that I gotta discover about myself, and hopefully by learning about them, I can start making, the right decisions that will help me eventually feel like like I already overcame the difficulties, and eventually get to live a good life, like the American dream. I think the American dream is something that you could live anywhere in the world. It's a mindset. But yeah, it's something that, I think every human being wants. They want to get to like that epitome of the Maslow pyramid, like the self actualization, and be happy, permanently happy, be satisfied with your life, feel good, be good, and yeah, hopefully I'll get there soon. So that's all I got for this video. I kind of almost cried right there a little bit. But yeah, I'll see you all next time. And if you want to say anything, leave it in the comments. And so I'll see you all. Peace.